I'm a 30-year-old man who's been grinding in the finance industry for the past 8 years. My brother, Caleb, torched my restaurant after I refused to hand over a 50% stake. Now he's behind bars, and I used his $250,000 inheritance to rebuild the place, bigger and better. I reside in a modest home on Kansas City's south side, which I purchased for $400,000 because it's in a respectable neighborhood. Years of 60-hour workweeks and meticulous budgeting allowed me to earn every penny. Growing up, the family dynamic was crystal clear. Caleb, 4 years my junior, was the golden boy while I was just there. Caleb could flunk math with a D, and my parents would blame the teacher's bias. If he quit his third job in 6 months, they'd claim the workplace wasn't supportive. Meanwhile, I was constantly under scrutiny. Act more mature, they'd say. Set a better example, that's what older brothers do. I heard it so often I could repeat it in my sleep. I didn't get used to it because it felt right. I adapted because expecting less from my parents meant less disappointment. It was about getting by. High school was rough. Caleb got endless praise for making the junior varsity basketball team, but my parents skipped my academic decathlon state finals, where I took second place. They had to drive Caleb to his game. They told me when I came home with a silver medal. That medal ended up buried in my desk drawer, never mentioned again. For college, I worked 2 jobs to cover tuition at Missouri State, while Caleb got a full ride to Mizzou, courtesy of my parents, plus a shiny new Civic as a graduation gift. Me, I got a firm handshake and a lecture about their high expectations. The only person in the family who made me feel valued was my grandfather. He wasn't warm or sentimental, but his actions spoke volumes. Whenever I visited, a cup of black coffee was waiting. "A young man like you needs to stay sharp, not indulge in sweets," he'd say. When my computer crashed during my first job and I couldn't afford a replacement, a small deposit appeared in my account the next day. When I called to thank him, he brushed it off. "It's from my savings, not much, but enough to keep you from struggling alone." He never brought it up again, but I never forgot it. My grandfather, a World War II veteran and machinist for 4 decades, was tough but fair. He taught me practical skills, changing my car's oil, fixing a leaky faucet, and investing wisely. "Never depend on others to build your life," he'd say while we tinkered with his old Chevy in the garage. He showed up to every milestone, high school graduation, college, my finance certification ceremony, each time handing me a card with a $100 bill and a note that read, "Proud of you." Simple, but it meant the world. When he passed, I lost the only family member who truly saw me. At the attorney's office for the will reading, my grandfather's careful planning became clear. He left $200,000 each to Caleb and me, $100,000 to my parents, and split ownership of their house 50-50 between Caleb and me. The attorney explained his reasoning. My parents' favoritism toward Caleb made him distrust their ability to fairly manage the estate. He feared I'd be left with nothing. My parents were stunned. My mother's jaw dropped, my father's face flushed red, and Caleb stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. My grandfather had sold his own house for $600,000 before his death, and that's where the inheritance came from. He'd ensured I wouldn't be shortchanged. I deposited my $200,000 and knew exactly what to do with it. In finance, I learned idle money loses value fast, so I decided to open a restaurant, not out of a love for cooking, but because I saw it as a solid business opportunity with steady income potential if managed well. After months of studying Kansas City's food scene, I identified a gap for upscale comfort food in the Crossroads district. The location had strong foot traffic, affordable rent, and proximity to the business district for lunchtime crowds. I invested $180,000 to launch the venture, hiring Andra, a seasoned chef I met through a client. Trained in New Orleans, Andra had worked at top-tier restaurants but wanted a smaller venue to flex his creativity. The restaurant became his culinary playground and my business endeavor. I kept my finance job, hiring a reliable manager to oversee daily operations. When the restaurant opened, I invited everyone, including my parents and Caleb, hoping they'd finally take pride in my achievement. The place had glowing local reviews and was fully booked for the first 2 weekends. But during the opening celebration, my mother leaned over and said, "You should have brought Caleb in on this. He's always dreamed of owning a restaurant." My accomplishment was reframed as a missed opportunity for my brother. Caleb acted like he ran the place, critiquing the menu to Andra's face, bossing the waitstaff, and telling guests he was consulting on the business side. I stayed quiet, used to his behavior. The early days were grueling. I worked my finance job from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., then headed to the restaurant until midnight. Weekends were consumed by supplier issues and staffing challenges. I hadn't taken a day off in months, but it paid off. We built a loyal customer base, earned stellar reviews, and were named one of Kansas City's top 10 new restaurants by the local paper. The business turned a profit faster than expected, and I was proud of what I'd created. While I was building a business, Caleb was blowing through his $200,000 inheritance in under a year, partying, renting sports cars, and splurging on VIP tables. Social media posts showed him flaunting a $5,000 watch, weekend trips to Vegas, and posing with a rented Lamborghini as if it were his. Worse, he spread lies that the restaurant was a family business, even handing out his card to suppliers and claiming he made purchasing decisions. One night, my bar manager showed me a $700 tab Caleb tried to write off as a business expense. When confronted, he shrugged, saying, "We're family. It's all the same pot." Then Caleb got his girlfriend, Vanessa, pregnant. He'd led her to believe he was a successful restaurateur, but she soon learned he was jobless and broke. Yet this didn't curb his entitlement, it fueled it. He became obsessed with taking my business. The family drama escalated when my mother called me to a family meeting at their house. I arrived to find 20 relatives, mostly from her side, arranged like a courtroom, with chairs facing the sofa where my mother sat. Two strangers flanked Caleb. His friend Travis, a repeat offender with tattoos and a shaved head, and our cousin Jake, who'd been living at my parents' house. My mother announced Vanessa's pregnancy and their upcoming wedding, prompting polite applause. I offered a quiet congratulations. Then came the real agenda. My mother stood, looked at me, and said, "We're welcoming a new family member, but starting a family isn't easy, especially with Caleb unemployed." She paused, then dropped the bombshell. "Ethan, you've worked hard, and I'm proud of you. But I want you to think bigger, think of your brother and his child. You should make Caleb a co-owner of the restaurant. He needs stability, and family businesses should stay in the family. He deserves an equal share, no investment required." Relatives nodded, one even saying, "Ethan's the older brother, he should look out for his own." The room felt suffocating. They weren't asking, they were demanding. I stared at my glass for a minute before responding. "Are you serious? I built that restaurant with my own money, $180,000 and 80-hour weeks. You want me to give half to Caleb for free? That's not happening." My mother snapped back. "Your brother's unemployed and about to be a father. You're being selfish. Would you let your nephew grow up without support?" I stood, ignoring the stares. "Where's the $200,000 Caleb got from Grandpa?" Caleb chimed in, voice smooth. "I invested it with a friend, but the deal tanked." I laughed. "You blew it on parties and motorcycles. Should I show everyone your strip club receipts?" His eyes flashed with anger, but he stayed silent. Travis glared at me. I turned to my parents. "I'm not giving him my restaurant. If you want him to have a share, pay me $200,000 for it. Do whatever you want with it." My father exploded, throwing his drink at me. "Watch your tone. I'm still your father, and you won't disrespect me in this house." The room went silent. I wiped my face, grabbed my coat, and left, saying, "Thanks for reminding me where I stand." I drove home in silence, ignoring the flood of calls and texts from relatives, some apologizing, others lecturing me to help Caleb. My parents hounded me with guilt trips and demands. I blocked their numbers, but they started showing up at my house and restaurant. One night, Caleb and Travis barged in during dinner service, accusing me of stealing from the family and demanding a stake. I had them removed. Staff grew uneasy. My hostess quit after Caleb threatened to fire her, and 2 servers adjusted their schedules to avoid him. Andra stayed loyal, but the drama was wearing on him. I consulted a lawyer about a restraining order, but without direct threats of violence, a cease and desist letter was the best option. I delivered it to my parents' house. Days later, my mother caused a scene at my office, forcing security to escort her out. My boss warned me about personal issues affecting my job. The situation worsened when Caleb, high and belligerent, confronted our hostess over a reserved table. I told him to leave. He lunged at me, knocking over a table and shattering dishes. Customers fled as we grappled. He landed a punch to my jaw, but I pinned him down. "You think you're better than me?" he spat. "I'll show you what happens when you cross me." Security dragged him out as he screamed, "If I can't have it, neither will you." I filed a police report for assault and trespassing, noting his threat. Things quieted down, no sign of Caleb, no calls. I thought he'd backed off, but I was wrong. Andra called in a panic. "The restaurant's on fire." I raced across town, seeing an orange glow from blocks away. Fire trucks blocked the street and my restaurant was engulfed in flames. The fire chief told me the interior was mostly gone. "Any idea how it started?" he asked. I mentioned Caleb's threat. "I can't prove it, but I know it was him." I gave a detailed statement to the police and fire investigators, outlining Caleb's actions. Detective Harper, leading the case, said arson investigations take time to prove intent and identity. Meanwhile, I dealt with insurance adjusters, displaced staff, and business losses. Reservations dropped, and Yelp reviews mentioned the family drama. I hired a security guard, adding unexpected costs. When I called Caleb, he answered casually, denying everything with a smug, "Maybe it was electrical. Old buildings, you know." I hung up, certain he was responsible and confident he thought he'd get away with it. The fire investigation confirmed arson. Accelerant was spread through the back entrance, and the cameras were disabled. But Andra's kitchen camera caught two figures, resembling Caleb and Travis, pouring liquid and lighting a match. The footage wasn't clear enough for a positive ID, but it was evidence. Detectives tracked phone records and interviewed witnesses, building a case. My parents showed up at my house, looking exhausted, wanting to talk about Caleb. I let them in, bracing for what came next. I stood in the doorway, staring at my parents' haggard faces. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands clutching a crumpled tissue. My father's usual stern posture was slumped, his jaw tight. "Ethan, we need to talk," my mother said, her voice shaky but insistent. I stepped aside, letting them into my small living room. The air felt heavy, like the prelude to another ambush. I didn't offer them coffee or a seat. I just crossed my arms and waited. "We know things have been tense," my mother began, settling onto the couch anyway. My father stood by the window, avoiding my gaze. "But Caleb's in trouble, real trouble. The police came to our house yesterday asking questions about the fire. They're saying it's arson, Ethan." Her voice cracked and she dabbed her eyes. "He's our son, your brother. We can't let him go to prison." I leaned against the wall, my jaw still sore from Caleb's punch. "He burned down my restaurant, Mom, my business, everything I poured my life into. And you're here to what, ask me to save him?" My voice was calm, but inside I was seething. Years of their favoritism flashed through my mind, Caleb's free ride, his new car, their endless excuses for his failures. My father finally turned, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know it was him, Ethan. You're jumping to conclusions. The police don't have proof." "They have footage," I shot back. "Blurry, but it's Caleb and Travis pouring accelerant in my kitchen. They're pulling phone records, Dad. They'll find him." I didn't mention how the insurance company's investigators were also digging, or how the restaurant's losses were piling up. $50,000 in damages beyond the deductible, plus weeks of lost revenue. I didn't need to, they weren't here for me. My mother reached out, her hand trembling. "Ethan, please, if you tell the police you're not sure it was him, maybe they'll drop it. You have insurance. You can rebuild." "But Caleb, he's got a baby on the way. Vanessa's a wreck. They can't afford this." I laughed, short and bitter. "Rebuild with what? The insurance barely covers the structure, not the lost business or the staff I had to lay off. And you're worried about Caleb's kid? What about me? I worked for every cent of that place while Caleb blew his inheritance on parties and lies." I stepped closer, my voice steady but sharp. "He threatened me, Mom. Said if he couldn't have the restaurant, I wouldn't either. Then it burned. You really think that's a coincidence?" My father's face darkened. "You've always been jealous of him, haven't you? Always wanted to be the big shot, lording your success over us. Caleb's made mistakes, sure, but he's family. You don't turn your back on family." "Family?" I snapped. "Where was family when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college? When Grandpa was the only one at my graduations? You've never once cared about what I've built. Now you're here begging for Caleb, who tried to destroy me." I pointed at the door. "Get out, I'm done with this." My mother sobbed, but my father grabbed her arm, pulling her up. "You'll regret this, Ethan," he said, his voice low. "You're tearing this family apart." They left without another word, the door slamming behind them. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Stephanie. "You're being too hard on them. Caleb needs help, not prison." I deleted it and blocked her number. The next few weeks were a blur of stress and paperwork. Detective Harper called with updates. The phone records placed Caleb and Travis near the restaurant the night of the fire, contradicting their alibi. A gas station camera 2 blocks away caught them buying a canister of gasoline hours before the blaze. "It's not airtight yet," Harper said, "but we're close. If we can tie the accelerant to that purchase, we've got him." I thanked her, but the weight of the situation pressed harder. The insurance company was dragging its feet, suspicious of the arson claim, and I had to dip into my savings to cover legal fees and keep my staff afloat. Andra, ever loyal, stuck by me. He'd lost his creative outlet in the fire, but was already sketching new menu ideas for when we rebuilt. "We'll come back stronger," he said one night over beers at my place. "Your brother's an idiot, but he can't stop us." His confidence kept me grounded, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. What if Caleb got away with it? What if the case fell apart? Then came the break. Detective Harper called me to the station. "We got a witness," she said, her voice steady but triumphant. "A delivery driver saw two men matching Caleb and Travis's descriptions near the restaurant's back entrance that night. He didn't think much of it until he heard about the fire. Plus, we found traces of the same accelerant in Travis's car. It's enough for a warrant." My heart raced. "You're arresting them?" "Already did," she said. "Caleb's in custody. Travis, too. They're being charged with arson and conspiracy. Caleb's also facing assault charges from the fight at the restaurant. We'll need you to testify if it goes to trial." I agreed, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Justice was close, but I'd have to face Caleb in court. The news spread fast. My parents called from a new number, leaving voicemails begging me to drop the charges. "He's your brother," my mother cried. "You can't do this to him." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on the future. The insurance finally paid out, though it wasn't enough to cover everything. Then I remembered Caleb's inheritance, or what was left of it. My grandfathers will had named us co-owners of my parents' house, and Caleb's share was still worth $250,000. With him in prison, I consulted my lawyer about forcing a sale. It wasn't revenge, it was practicality. I needed the money to rebuild. The house sale went through after months of legal wrangling. My parents fought it, but the court upheld my grandfather's will. I used the $250,000 to break ground on a new restaurant, this time bigger, with a sleek design and an expanded menu. Andra was thrilled, already planning a grand reopening. The local paper ran a story about the fire and my comeback, calling it a triumph of resilience. Customers pledged to return, and pre-bookings were strong. Caleb's trial was set for the following spring. I didn't visit him, though Vanessa reached out, asking for help with legal fees. I declined. She'd made her choice, believing his lies. My parents moved to a smaller apartment, bitter and distant. They sent a letter accusing me of betraying the family, but I didn't reply. Grandpa's words echoed in my mind. "Never depend on others to build your life." I was doing just that. As the new restaurant took shape, I stood in the half-finished dining room watching workers install the bar. The scars of the past year, Caleb's betrayal, the fire, the family fallout, still stung, but I felt something new, freedom. I'd built this once, and I'd do it again on my terms. Caleb could rot, my parents could stew, but I was moving forward. The grand opening was 3 months away, and I was ready to prove them all wrong, again.